Okay, this is the counter video to the most beautiful albums of all time. This one entitled The Most Repulsive Albums of All Time. Now, I'm not gonna go into some giant spiel on what I count as repulsive slash disturbing, but I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into things, get into my selections, that sort of thing. So I'm starting off with two heavy metal albums, that being Cannibal Corpse, Tomb of the Mutilated, and Carcass, Symphonies of Sickness. When I get into the first album, Tomb of the Mutilated, now this is an album that's been venerated by death metal fans, by heavy metal fans, for its infamy and its imagery. And you see, the thing is that Cannibal Corpse is a band that's based purely in shock value. They're not trying to make a point, which is one reason why I find them unappealing personally, but I think the production is great. It sounds like a Jehovah's Witness, knocking on a doorknob or something. And the reason why the shock value thing is just unappealing to me is because the whole thing on this album, the whole theme is that it's just about this gradual abuse of a child, just done purely for imagery's sake, which is just repulsive to me. Tracks like Entrails Ripped from a Virgin's Necropedophile, Icon Blood. From what I understand, all these tracks are linked and they just tell this horrible abuse story, which is just, again, unappealing as just pure shock value. On the flip side, we have Carcass, who in turn are probably my favorite band of all time, in which this is probably my favorite album of all time. This came out years before Tomb of the Mutilated did, and I think everything about it's a lot more well done. The songs are a lot more memorable, and the concepts are disturbing, but they're even more grotesque in some up way, which I think is kind of interesting. You have tracks like Rika Putrefaction, which are about the getting high off the smell of dead bodies, which is the most heavy metal concept I've ever heard. The title Rika Putrefaction comes from their first album, which might be even more repulsive because the production is just so awful that everything just gets completely jumbled in this giant audible abortion. Back to Symphonies of Sickness, you have tracks like Embryonic Necropsy and Devourment, which is about eating dead babies. A song that's ironically more in good taste than some of the crap on the Cannibal Corpse album. Every track on here is really grimy, it's disgusting, it's wonderful. Not everyone likes it, but I think it's just one of the greatest horror albums of all time. If you want something that sounds more repulsive than Carcass, go a step up with Pissgrave with the album Suicide Euphoria. This album is more violent, more ridiculous, more rambunctious, more fast. It's like the Super Nintendo.
It's a bit more exciting, a bit more challenging, a bit more graphic, a bit more colorful, a bit more realistic, a bit more level.
Really disgusting, really bludgeoning. For a lot of people, this is kind of where they end, but I'm going to keep going. You see, when Carcass invented their splatter death metal sound, and it was kind of in turn blended with grindcore, which kind of gave birth to this whole gore grind genre. The genre of gore grind has produced some of the most grimy and disgusting bands of all time, like Lymphatic Phlegm, whose vocals are so disgusting that it's the only music that actually makes me nauseous. You also have bands who have really disgusting, repulsive packaging, like the band Nunslaughter, who packaged their album with live maggots in it. It's like, who does that? What? And of course, Runzel Stern and Gurglestock, woohoo, who come from the whole avant-garde world, who packaged their album Idiot Hole with the main man of Runzel Stern, Roger Ebert, who packaged it with his dogs, and the waste was collected by his wife, and he put it in 100 CDs and sold them for money. Or maybe not money, but it's a very ridiculous art piece, whatever it is. We also have albums that sound really repulsive outside of just the death metal realm. These are just some of the most repulsive sounding albums ever. We have 150 Murderous Passions from our guy, William Bennett from White House. This thing was a collaboration with Nurse with Wound, and it sounds like an industrial construction site. If it was trying to kill me, in my ears, as torturous as possible. Certainly music that very few people will enjoy. You could also go on the calmer side with Current 93 and the album Nature Unveiled, an album that I used to listen to in Walmart because it made me feel normal around all the crazy Walmart people. But this thing is an extremely uncomfortable, brooding, ritual ambient album that's very uncomfortable, to say the least. Dude, I need Smegma! I have to put that in the video. Me looking for Smegma. The next album I actually own on CD. Smegma, Pigs for Leapers. What an album cover, am I right? Look at that. Wow. This thing is some of the most amateur, ridiculous music you're ever going to hear, which tries its best to be as unpleasant as possible. I mean, just like everything about it is just unnerving. Particularly the track Mr. Potato's Flotation Exercises is one of the most outlandish pieces of music out there. It's not even so much that it's as repulsive as some of the other tracks, but it's just the most uncanny thing I've ever heard. Alright, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. So I have 2 albums. The first one is To Serve Man by Cattle Decapitation. Now, Cattle Decapitation nowadays is known as one of the greatest, like, kind of modern death metal groups, even though they've been around for, like, years and years and years and years. One of their first albums contained a sample of the video Check Clear, which was so hyper-violent and disgusting that it supposedly gave people PTSD. So if you want to hear the first 8-10 seconds of it on YouTube, there you go. And at last we have an album that's so disgusting that I'm not even gonna say the name of it. It's the most hideous, repulsive thing I've ever found, and it's entitled, at least by the group, I'm gonna call it Operation Miranda. That's what I'm gonna say. The album's uninteresting, it's boring, but with the name as well as the cover art, a victim of a murder by a pedophile who went out and tortured them. I mean, what more can I say than this? The most repulsive album of all time. One of the most repulsive albums of all time. Please, guys, listen to more Smegma and Carcass. And with that, I don't know what the next most albums is going to be, so if anyone wants me to do, like, you know, a specific album or a specific theme, please let me know. I will look into it, maybe.